I just feel like I've been around the block, ripping up fantasy stock, working around the clock. Look at the view from the top. Researching rookies a lot? No, I just be listening to pods. Yeah, one in particular, I'm just a messenger. Let me just pass on the rock. Browning, brunning, pruning, pronouncing ain't what he's doing. What he's doing is not losing, but infusing you with new things. And there's Dennis the Bennett, yeah. The man is a menace, yeah. Building a dynasty, some of the finest things. Promise you, you won't regret it. Sly as a fox, cultured in pop. Give him his props. Here is a thought, here is a box, and you cannot compare them at all. So don't even try. Careful with the news, but when you use a take, I take up Tony Fire. I mean Dyer, because anyone else is a huge mistake. Whoa, fantasy round table, fantasy round table, yeah. Fantasy round table. Come take a look at the crown, baby. Hey, fantasy round table, fantasy round table, woo. Fantasy round table. Come take a look at the crown, baby. Go.
Hello and welcome to another episode of the Fantasy Football Roundtable Podcast. Do not adjust that dial. It is Thursday. Game is about 57 minutes away from kicking off. We are coming to you a day early because one of us is making the trek to Disney World in essentially the middle of the night tomorrow. So for a weekend away with the wife, looking forward to being there, hoping for some nice weather. I feel like I got the Florida hurricane. I did my vacation in June, so hopefully I'm not getting a sequel here in October.
Well, I'm pulling for you. I hope you don't get the hurricane business either.
Yeah, the way the week is going, I'm not putting complete odds on it, but I am looking forward to getting down there. We have never been. Going to do a quick 3 days and be back on Monday, back here on Tuesday. Hopefully none the worse for the wear.
Hopefully.
Well, we do have a full slate. No teams on a bye this week. That means 16 games. We did talk about the Thursday night game last week, but no TJ Hawkinson. They have decided not to activate him. They will activate him on Friday, so he will be available for week 9. Cooper Kupp is making his return, and in a massive surprise to me, they activated Puka Nacua, but they're not sure if he's going to play tonight. Does that change any of your thinking, Dennis? I think we had both picked the Vikings.
Yeah, I think I'm going to stick with the Vikings. It's, Puka, It's weird that they're activating him, but yet they're like, I don't know if we're going to play him. It feels like a lot of brinksmanship. And, Kupp has been on the edge. It's really about, can those two receivers, they'll pick up where they left off if they're healthy. And then that helps Kyren Williams a lot. I don't know if I have guts to start Puka Nacua tonight. I don't know how many times we've been burned with somebody coming back off of injury and, playing 6 snaps. But I love firing up Kyren Williams tonight. Stafford, maybe a low-end QB2 if I'm feeling frisky, but, I'm okay with Kupp.
Yeah, I am playing Kupp. I am definitely not playing Puka Nacua. Him being activated and then them talking about they're not sure how many snaps or roll or if he'll even play at all. That's you know what? I would rather leave 15 points on the bench than put 0 points in my lineup on a Thursday night when we have 32 teams in action. So next, the rest of the week 8 preview begins. No more London games. We will have a Germany game, but that's a little bit later in November. It's an odd quirk. No bye weeks this week. The byes continue in week 9, go through week 12, then no byes the week of Thanksgiving, which is week 13, and then 6 teams are on a bye in week 12. Thank you very much. 6 teams are on a bye in week 14. So got to let the
just
NFL.
In time for that playoff push.
There you go. First up, Philadelphia Eagles 4-2 at the 3-4 Cincinnati Bengals. Dennis, A.J. Brown's been pretty good. Saquon Barkley's been pretty good. Still no practice today for Dallas Goedert, so looking more like he might miss. But how are we feeling about Devonta Smith? Only 1 reception for, I believe, -2 yards on Sunday.
So Devonta Smith was a victim of game script as much as anything else. A.J. Brown is the alpha there. He's going to be the top dog. If they're going to force the ball to one guy, it's going to be A.J. Brown. However, I think they're going to look around and be like, Devonta Smith would be the wide receiver 1 on a significant number of teams. And while we do want to win, we also want to keep our players happy. So, while I still think it's A.J. Brown and it's Saquon Barkley, Skinny Batman's going to get a little bit of bounce back today. Cincinnati's just not a great defense. So I think it'll be okay for him. He's probably a wide receiver 3 for the most part. He may have a couple better weeks across the season, but I don't think you want to count on him as anything higher than a wide receiver 3 from week to week because of A.J. Brown, because of their running game and the lower passing volume. You need to have a realistic expectation. He's a good player, though.
Yeah, and I've been a little bummed. I thought they'd have a more robust passing game with Kellen Moore, but you're right, we haven't totally seen it. I still think he could end up in the wide receiver 2 range, but prior to the season, I thought both those guys could end up as wide receiver 1s, and just not happening. For the Bengals, we saw Mike Gesicki break out for a few weeks at tight end, but he has all but disappeared with the reemergence of T. Higgins. Sometimes they're even throwing it to Eric All. Is he somebody that might be droppable in redraft?
Yeah. I saw that one game and, told myself, well, Higgins was out. Don't get your hopes up too much. And he faded even before Higgins got back. Cincinnati just doesn't throw the ball to the tight end. It's an afterthought position. And I get it when you've got Jamar Chase and T. Higgins and Joe Burrow is a thrower. He's an old-fashioned gunslinger quarterback. He's got a little bit of mobility. Gesicki will have some moments. He'll make some plays. Eric All will have some moments and make some plays. And ultimately, I think Eric All will end up taking over just because he's such a better blocker. He's not quite the athlete that Gesicki is, but he's no slouch in the athletic department. And he's a willing and capable blocker. So I think All, if not before the season is over, going into next year, All will be the starting tight end. But he's going to be no better than the way that this team is built. He'll be in that vast tier of tight ends that could be anywhere from tight end 8 to tight end 20 on any given week.
Kind of depends, since it seems like T. Higgins is going. They may not have any receivers. This was a tough game. You can make a case for either team, but I'm going with the Eagles here.
So am I.
Next up, the 5-2 Baltimore Ravens at the 1-3 and reeling, or 1-6 and reeling Cleveland Browns. Dennis, has been kind of all over the board for pass catchers for the Ravens. How are you feeling about them going into this week?
So, excuse me. Love Zay Flowers, sitting at wide receiver 19 on the season, but he's only wide receiver 30 in points per game, which kind of goes back to that, the Ravens passing game overall. It's just, he's at wide receiver 19 because players have been injured and out and on buys. He's probably somebody that I'd be okay with as a low-end wide receiver too most weeks. Bateman, he had a monster week last week. He's wide receiver 26 on the season, wide receiver 38 in points per game. We're not going to be able to count on 5 touchdowns from Lamar Jackson on a weekly basis. The passing game is efficient, and it's one of those things where we look around and we watch Lamar play, and it's like he's playing better than he did last year when he won the MVP. And I think Derrick Henry's part of that, the maturity of Rashad Bateman. They're probably the deepest team at tight end in the league. The defense is playing pretty well. So I like the Ravens wide receivers. Again, Flowers is preferably a 3, but if I have to squeeze him in at a 2, Bateman probably is a low end 4, just so that I'm not relying too heavy. Play with them lower and hope for that upside. The last 3 games, Bateman has been wide receiver 8, Flowers has been wide receiver 11. It's just a touchdown flurry has been part of the reason there as well.
Meanwhile, Deshaun Watson is out for the year. Jameis Winston was officially named the starter. What are you hoping to see from him on Sunday?
Well, he started 10 games in the last 5 seasons. So it's easy. When I went and looked at it, I'm like, man, he threw 33 touchdowns. And yes, he had 30 interceptions, but he throws. And I looked at it, I was like, man, that was 5 years ago. So, he's got a career 61% completion rate. He'll take shots. He ain't afraid to throw the ball. He clearly plays in a league where you don't get minus points for interceptions. So he's not worried about throwing interceptions. I don't think he can be worse than Deshaun Watson was. So we got that going for us. I'm not rushing to put him in any lineup, and I'm not throwing any fab on him. And if I have him rostered anywhere, I'm not looking to stick him in a lineup. But I'll be interested to kind of see, can he get anything out of Judy and more? Cedric Tillman had 8 catches last week. Will Njoku still get the volume he's been getting? So it feels like it should be a modest bump for the Browns offense, but they still have issues on their offensive line. And Jameis is who Jameis is. So even when he's playing well, you're going to always have that, bad luck schleprock cloud of doom over you waiting for the interception.
I am taking the Ravens in this one.
I initially had the Browns, but I'm switching to the Ravens as well.
Next up, the 1-5 Tennessee Titans at the 5-1 Detroit Lions. For Tennessee, DeAndre Hopkins is gone. Are we feeling better about Calvin Ridley?
I mean, you're feeling better from the standpoint of he doesn't have an aging alpha across from him demanding targets. Unfortunately, he has Will Levis and Mason Rudolph as his quarterbacks. So I don't know how good I feel about it. He's currently wide receiver 69. I think he bumps up from there. Nick Westbrook-Akini and Tyler Boyd. It's not the scariest of wide receiver groups. So he's definitely the number 1 there now. He's probably a wide receiver 4.
Yeah, I agree. It's probably wide receiver 4. I think he was the wide receiver 1 there before. You'll need to monitor your Titans. Tyjae Spears, who missed last week, is still limited in practice, questionable. Same for Will Levis, who also surprisingly missed last week. And Ridley also was limited with a foot injury, so make sure to be following that for Friday updates. Meanwhile, Jamison Williams officially suspended for 2 games. We know Amon-Ra St. Brown and the running backs are going to get theirs, but what are you doing with pass catching options that are not Amon-Ra St. Brown?
So was that just BS? I heard that it was Viagra that he got busted taking.
I didn't see what it was.
Mean,
I just saw he's not contesting, and they officially
it's performance enhancing, but not on the football field.
You hope.
So anyway, so he's sitting at wide receiver 30. Amon-Ra's wide receiver 9. I expect him to get a little uptick. The real boost, I think, is going to go to Sam Laporta. I like Tim Patrick. He's, I'm a fan. I don't know that he's a game changer. Khalif Raymond will make a play here or there. Those guys are both like wide receiver 7s or 8s right now. I think Allen Robinson's been called up. It's really what it does is
you couldn't pay me to put in Allen Robinson at this point.
Oh, me either. What it does, I mean, I like the story of Allen Robinson going home to Detroit, so hopefully he gets a little bit of play while Jameson's out. But it actually kind of helps to narrow the funnel in Detroit. So now it's St. Brown, it's Laporta, it's Montgomery, it's Gibbs. But in reality, it doesn't narrow it that much because Jameson got 3 to 5 targets a week. So
yeah, not that great. I am with you. I'm hoping Laporta gets a boost, but outside of the two running backs, Amon-Ra and Laporta, I'm probably, unless I'm real desperate, not throwing anyone in. And if I did, it would be Patrick. But desperate. Hopefully, with 32 teams in action, you're not that desperate. I am taking the Lions.
So am I.
Next up, the 3-4 Arizona Cardinals at the 2-4 Miami Dolphins. What an enigmatic game this ought to be. Dennis, we all had high hopes for Marvin Harrison Jr. His 29-point explosion in week 2 got our hopes a little bit higher, but he is only wide receiver 31 on the season, averaging 10.6 points per game, but he has 4 of his 7 games with fewer than 6 points, including the last 3. Has not even hit 6 points in the last 3 games. How are you feeling about him?
Man, he's tied directly to a quarterback that doesn't produce fantasy numbers if he doesn't run. I mean, Kyler's on pace for a whopping 3,233 yards for 2024. It's great that if you roster him, it's great. He busts off a 40-yard touchdown here and there, racks up rushing yards that you wish Anthony Richardson would, but he's, as long as Harrison is tied to Kyler Murray, you're going to have some frustrating weeks.
Yeah, and it seems like they're not clicking it on the same page. That's worrying for me, but I guess I'm still starting him, but it's not been quite as robust as I was hoping. Meanwhile, Tua is coming back this week, said he is not wearing a Guardian cap as a personal choice, but will he lift up this Dolphins offense?
So it's kind of like Joliet Jake and Elwood Blues said, we're getting the band back together. If I roster Tua, unless I have legitimately, top 8 starting quarterbacks, top 10 starting quarterbacks, I'm sliding Tua in. I'm much like I talk about Kyron Williams being a 195-pound bell cow back, ride him till he breaks. I don't want Tua to get his head knocked off, but he's the straw that stirs the drink in Miami. And he gets the ball out, makes the right reads, gets it to those guys, has excellent placement on the deep ball. I'm not worried about Tua in this offense. And Arizona gives up the 5th most fantasy points, the 5th most passing yards, and the 8th most touchdown passes to quarterbacks. I think Tua comes back big this week.
Yeah, I agree. I am taking the Dolphins.
So am I.
2-5 New York Jets at the 1-6 New England Patriots. This ought to be the game of the week. Dennis, only 3 for 30 for Devontae Adams in his New York Jets debut, but did see 9 targets. Are you expecting a bigger week in week 2?
Well, Aaron's going to want to force the ball to him, excuse me, to show how smart he is by, pushing to get him there. I think he'll be productive. Him and Williams will both get significant targets. I think Williams will have higher yardage. Adams will probably have more TDs because him and Rodgers have that history. It's kind of like those, you've got those running backs that are great between the 20s and then the running backs that they play inside the 20s. That feels like Devonta Adams and Garrett Wilson right now. Wilson will, if he doesn't score when he gets the ball and heads for the end zone, if he gets run down inside the 10, expect the next 3 passes to go to Devonta Adams.
Meanwhile, for the Patriots, since turning it over to Drake May, he is QB 8 the past 2 weeks, averaging just over 21 points a game. What are you expecting from him against a good Jets team?
it's going to be a learning experience. You know, the Jets have a good defense. They're bottom 8 in fantasy points given up to quarterbacks. And if healthy, they're going to present a lot of problems for Drake May, even with Salah gone. I like that May has shown the ability to get the ball to players and playmakers, despite the fact that they don't have a whole heck of a lot of playmakers. And, you know, Hunter Henry is feasting. I'm still looking to see who is going to really take the lead in this current wide receiver group. You know, Kayshon Boutt's he's a guy I like. He's starting to play well. Jalen Polk is making some noise. You know, Tyquan Thornton isn't. Kendrick Bourne just came back. Bob Douglas he's probably the volume receiver. I just don't know how much volume there will be consistently right now. I think the Jets are going to present some issues for Drake May, but as long as he doesn't take like 10 sacks, I think it'll be good for him.
I am taking the Jets.
I switched from my preseason projection from the Patriots to the Jets.
Next up, the 4-3 Atlanta Falcons at the 4-3 Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Dennis, it feels like we've settled into a groove with these pass catchers for the Falcons. Drake London now wide receiver 3. Darnell Mooney is wide receiver 17. Kyle Pitts tight end 7. Are you feeling great about these guys?
Yeah. I mean, Kirk Cousins, he's not I'll put the team on my back, but he's definitely a guy that gets the ball where it needs to be. And the confidence that's grown in his repaired Achilles over the last few weeks has been good. The offensive line has actually held up pretty well for him and protected him pretty well. And they have a plus running game to go along with it. So, I mean, I think if you are in deep leagues, let's say you're in a start 11, start 12 league, Kadarrell Hodge is almost worth starting as wide receiver, Ray McLeod, wide receiver 58.
I was going to say Hodge only caught like that one big touchdown, but McLeod, he was looking pretty flexible there for a couple of weeks. He's fallen off a little bit, but still has deep league, appeal. Meanwhile, for the Buccaneers, we go from a team that's loaded at pass catchers to one that's hurting. Chris Godwin was wide receiver 2. Mike Evans, wide receiver 15. They're both gone. Godwin out for the year with that dislocated ankle. Evans gone until probably now week 12. What are we doing with Tampa Bay receivers?
Not a lot, because unfortunately, this is where Baker gets exposed. I guess the best thing the Buccaneers have going for their passing game is that Rachaad White, Bucky Irving, and Sean Tucker have presented a reasonably good running game, including the passing portion of the running backs. Cade Otton has popped up and playing well. But looking at Jalen McMillan, Sterling Shepard, Trey Palmer, Ryan Miller is an undrafted free agent. They're going to have to probably bring up at least one more guy off the practice squad. And McMillan has looked good. And Baker clearly has a connection with Sterling Shepard. Just Sterling Shepard is made out of glass, and I don't know how much more he's going to be able to take. But Shepard's wide receiver 50 over the last 3 games, and that's playing with Godwin and Evans. So he's established himself as that as somebody that can make some plays. I kind of want to watch and see how it plays out and see, do they establish some specific roles? Is somebody going to be able to move in? You know, McMillan's a little bit bigger. Can he make some of those same plays that Mike Evans used to make downfield? He doesn't have the bulk that Evans had, but he's not a short guy. Shepard is a classic slot guy. Will he be able to translate that in that Sean McVay / Liam Cohen offense? Will that work for what Shepard does? So, yeah, I'm kind of optimistic that somebody will rise to the occasion. I just don't know who it is, and I'm not going to place a bet in my lineup this week.
Same here. I am taking the Falcons in this one.
I've changed to the Falcons.
Green Bay Packers 5-2 at the 2-5 Jacksonville Jaguars. Dennis, how are you feeling about Josh Jacobs? He is currently sitting as RB15, averaging about 13 points a game.
I mean, Jacobs gets a little bit of, he's underappreciated, I think, is what I'm getting at. He's a pretty good running back. He's solid. He's on pace for 1,300 yards and 40 receptions, and that's not a bad season. I think what happens is he gets lost a little bit because Jordan Love will get pass happy, or not Love, LaFleur will get pass happy because, well, he's got Jordan Love and a stable full of really good wide receivers. And so I think Jacobs gets lost if the running game sputters. I don't think they get worked up and think they have to force it, and Jacobs will get lost a little bit in that. I like Jacobs. I think running back 15 is, I think he finishes higher than that on the year. So I think he'll pull into the wide receiver 1, low-end wide receiver 1 range.
Meanwhile, for the Jacksonville Jaguars, Brian Thomas Jr. has taken off. He is sitting at wide receiver 8 on the season, averaging 15.5 points per game. But what are we doing with their other receivers, Christian Kirk and Gabe Davis?
Starting Brian Thomas Jr. I mean, it's the thing that's hurting the overall passing game is that they're just a middle of the road passing volume team. They're not, if they threw it more with Christian Kirk and Gabe Davis, obviously if they threw it more, the production would be higher. But they've got Evan Ingram, who's a target hog, and they've got Brian Thomas Jr., who's just kind of different. Brian Thomas Jr. is like this if you took Christian Kirk and Gabe Davis and mashed them together, you've got a big guy with really good speed that can run decent routes and can separate and get away and get open. And that makes Trevor Lawrence want to throw the ball to him instead of Christian Kirk. I mean, Kirk has been disappointing, to say the least. I thought even if Thomas was good, I thought Kirk would still be better.
Yeah, Kirk has been a little bit disappointing. I definitely, Thomas has been great, but those other two, I have gotten to the point where I'm leery to play them, especially with Evan Ingram. I am taking the Packers.
I'm going to stick with my Jags pick. I don't know why. I don't have a good reason for it, but I'm like, well, I'm just not going to change this one. I think they can go 2 in a row.
The 4-3 Indianapolis Colts at the 5-2 Houston Texans. Dennis, what are we doing with Anthony Richardson? He only has one game with 15 or more points. He's averaging only 12 points a game as a starter. He has worse starting average than Daniel Jones.
I'm not starting him. I mean, he's in one quarterback leagues, he's droppable. In super flex leagues, he's working on it. He's not really startable. He's a QB3. Unfortunately, he is bad at throwing the ball, and his inexperience from college is really starting to come through. And what we thought would happen was that he would make up for it with his athletic ability, and he's just not running the ball consistently enough to make up for that. So I think if you have him in Dynasty, don't sweat it. He's not going to carry you to a championship game this year or championship this year, but you're looking to start somebody else. Let him ride the pine, get some experience in the league. I don't know that if I'm the Colts, if they keep winning ugly, I think they'll keep riding with him. But I think if they feel like they have a legitimate shot to make the playoffs, they might go to Flacco.
Yeah, I think this game could speak volumes for that. Meanwhile, for the Houston Texans, last year Tank Dell was kind of a fun story until he broke his leg there at the end of the season. We thought maybe he'd be able to come back, and even with Nico Collins out of the lineup, we haven't seen big games from him. In the 6 games he's played, he only has 2 games with 10 or more points. He's at wide receiver 66 right now, averaging only 8 points a game. What are you doing with Tank Dell?
Unfortunately, they've got a much better running game than they had last year with Joe Mixon, and that has taken a lot of emphasis off the passing game, despite them adding Stephon Diggs and bringing in Dell and Collins. There are times when they'll just grind Joe Mixon, and as a 6 foot, 230-pound running back, he can take the beating. Versus last year, targets are down about 17% for Tank Dell, and his receptions. So I had to figure out how I made the notes here. His receptions are down about 22%. Well, those sound like huge numbers. It's really, he's down about 1 target and 1 reception per game in real numbers. So he is experiencing a volume dip. The biggest issue is his receiving yards are down about 50%, from about 64 yards a game to 32 yards a game. So he's catching 1 less ball per week, and it's all short area stuff. He's not making big plays downfield. And it makes sense with Nico Collins and Stephon Diggs, who are both bigger outside wide receivers, that Dell isn't going to get as much opportunity out there. But that's really what's keeping him down.
I am taking the Texans in this one.
So am I.
Next up, the 2-5 New Orleans Saints at the 3-3 Los Angeles Chargers. Big news for the Saints this week, Dennis, was Alvin Kamara getting a 2-year extension. What do you think about that move?
That's some salary cap shenanigans going on in New Orleans still.
I guess it means they're not going to trade him, though, because it seemed like he was on the block to trade, and now it seems like they want to make sure he's there.
You know, it provides cap relief. It gives him the opportunity to maybe retire as a Saint. He's still got some left in the tank. As a pass catcher, you know, we've kind of always thought that they would bring in a big back to continue to pair him with to extend his career. You know, Jamal Williams had a good year or a bad year last year. Kendre Miller has never quite taken off. So it hasn't happened like they had hoped this year. But I can see them wanting to keep Kamara because he is a productive back. And even adding a couple years to him to be able to spread out some money, that's going to put him in a situation where he can continue to be productive in an offense that he knows, in a city that he loves, and that's always going to be good.
For the Chargers, how are you feeling about their receivers? You know, Josh Palmer has been banged up, only wide receiver 87. Quentin Johnson missed last week, but wide receiver 65. McConkey sitting at about wide receiver 45. Do you like how they're coming together? Are you feeling comfortable starting any of them?
You know, McConkey, I have started him fairly regularly the last 2 or 3 weeks because I haven't had a lot of other options. I have been mildly disappointed, but a lot of that too is they're not passing the ball very, very much. J.K. Dobbins has really kind of been putting up good numbers in the running game. And I think it's a growing experience with the new offense. I think McConkey will be fine going forward, but at wide receiver 45, I think that's a realistic expectation. And if he finishes as a wide receiver 3 this year, count your blessings.
Yeah, I feel like he's the kind of guy you put in expecting 8 to 10 points, maybe. You know, I think his average is right around 10 points per game, but he has some peaks and valleys in there. I am taking the Chargers at home.
So am I.
5-2 Buffalo Bills at the 4-3 Seattle Seahawks. Dennis, we're now a couple of weeks removed from that James Cook injury. He missed 2 weeks ago, was kind of limited a little bit last week. Do you think he gets more on track for full status here against Seattle?
Yeah, I think they'll let it ride with him. He's an explosive back, runs the ball well, really good out of the backfield, catches a lot of passes. I do think they're comfortable with Ray Davis taking some of the load between the tackles, and Davis has looked good, and even Ty Johnson in that role. So there's going to be more of it'll still be James Cook, but I don't think we're going to have as much James Cook kind of running into the middle of the offensive line as we may have thought. So I like it for Cook. I think it allows him to be productive, doing the things he does well, which is play out in space, catch the ball, run the ball on the edges, and just be a dynamic player. I think he continues to ride as an RB1.
Yes, and good news is he is off the injury report as of today. For the Seahawks, DK Metcalf not practicing this week. They said they will evaluate his knee on Friday and make a decision about whether they can risk it. But if he does not play, how are you feeling about JSN, Lockett, and Fant?
I think JSN and Lockett will both get a little bit of a boost. I think Lockett's probably the one that is more likely to take the deep balls that they would try with Metcalf and Lockett. Jake Bobo is a guy that's going to step into the starting lineup, and he'll be their big wide receiver. But, I mean, he ran like a 4.98 or something, 40 at the combine or pro day or something really slow. He doesn't run that slow when you watch him on the field. He doesn't look that slow, but he's not 4.3 fast like DK Metcalf. And Noah Fant, he's tight end 10 over the last 5 games. I think he's moved into pretty close to being startable every week.
I am taking the Bills in this one.
So am I.
Next up, the 1-6 Carolina Panthers at the 4-3 Denver Broncos. Dennis Andy Dalton, we mentioned on Tuesday, had been in a car accident. He sprained his throwing thumb. That means Bryce Young is back in the starting lineup. What are you expecting from Young?
I don't know if I have any expectations from him. I just want him to look better than he did at the start of the season. Hopefully he can, maybe with the offensive line, having a few games to gel a little bit and establish some running game with Chuba Hubbard. I think that there's a chance he ends up playing better. You don't accidentally get drafted as the number 1 overall pick. Now, that doesn't guarantee you're going to be a success, but hopefully his last season and this season, maybe it's humbled him a little bit. Not that he was one of these braggadocious guys, but helped him to kind of get a focus and figure out what he needs to do. Unfortunately, he's a 5'10", 185-pound NFL quarterback, which isn't great. And so he needs protection. He can't take a bunch of hits. He can't be under a ton of pressure. He's got a decent arm and good placement. Let's see if he's learned anything. And as nice as it was for Dalton to come in, I mean, to be fair, they are 1-6. It isn't like Dalton put him on his shoulders and willed him to victories.
Yeah, I think he's 1-4. So, I mean, it hadn't been a lot better. For the Broncos, it seems like Javonte Williams starting to distance himself a little bit from some of the other backs and getting more and more up to speed, especially the last 4 games. He's getting targets. He's doing better on the ground. How are you feeling about him for fantasy?
I love him as my RB3. I'm okay if he's my RB2. It's just there's going to be some weeks where Sean Payton tries to outsmart himself and Javonte ends up with 6 or 7 touches, and that's not great. The best thing right now is he's going up against a Carolina defense that can't stop the run. And so This should be a good. If you were going to only start Javonte Williams 1 week all year, I think this is the week.
Yeah, I'm
no disrespect intended.
I'm feeling very hopeful. I've actually been starting him the last couple of weeks, and I think Jaleel McLaughlin's the one a lot of people had a lot of preseason high hopes for. He seems to have kind of faded into that is not a good play right now, my friend. So I am taking the Broncos this week.
I'm taking the Broncos too. Do you think Audric Estime is going to continue to make a little bit of a push? Or
yeah, and I think he has a better shot in the red area than Jaleel McLaughlin. McLaughlin's not catching a lot of passes either. Javonte's been a better pass catching option, so I think that's. But really, Javonte's the only running back. Javonte and Cortland Sutton are about the only guys I'm still starting, and even then, it could not go well for you.
Yeah, just see last week with Cortland Sutton.
The 6-0 Kansas City Chiefs at the 2-5 Las Vegas Raiders. DeAndre Hopkins acquired by the Chiefs. We know Juju Smith-Schuster is out this week. What are you expecting to see from Hopkins in his first game?
Well, it's like that thing you sent me. I feel for the guy. He went from the Tennessee Titans quarterbacks to the quarterback who leads the NFL in interceptions.
I know, it made me laugh.
So, no, he's – and they ask Andy Reid, they're like, are you going to play him this week? And he's like, why not? It's DeAndre freaking Hopkins.
I'd be shocked if he didn't play. We've seen all these receivers that have moved to getting into the lineup. Now, he may not have incredible success, but he wouldn't have incredible success with the Titans.
Well, and Mahomes is going to try to figure it out with him. He's going to, he'll give him the, look, man, you just run around and I'll find you approach. I've been doing it for years with Travis Kelce. You get out there and do it. I'll find you and I'll put the ball where you can catch it. So I'm not expecting a 10 for 102 touchdowns, but it wouldn't surprise me if he had 4 or 5 catches for 60 or 70 yards.
Meanwhile, for the Raiders, it seems like Alexander Mattison has kind of taken over as their RB1. He's actually RB21 on the season, averaging 12 points per game. How are you feeling about Mattison?
Kind of good. I mean, he's RB18 over the last 5 games. I'm not sure what's going on with that team that, you'd think a team that's kind of bad like that isn't going to be very good in the running game, but Madison's putting up numbers. You feel like, I guess their defense is good enough to keep games close enough that they feel like, Madison can be beneficial to them. I think Madison is, he's worth you could do worse as your RB2. I'd be happier if he was my RB3, but he's doing all right.
I think where you were able to pick him up in drafts or pick him up on the wire in Dynasty, he's probably been a boon to you because a lot of people were banking on Zamir White, and that has not panned out.
That's pretty jaggy there. The challenges that Madison has this week is Kansas City gives up the fewest fantasy points to running backs through 7 games. But, actually I was going to say, but it's the Chiefs and they're always ahead. But now that I think about it, the Chiefs haven't been that far ahead.
No. I am taking the Chiefs in this one.
So am I.
Chicago Bears 4-2 at the 5-2 Washington Commanders. We hoped it was going to be a matchup of the first and second overall draft picks. May not take place. We'll get to that in a minute. But coming off a bye, how are you feeling about Caleb Williams?
Well, Caleb is sitting at QB 19, which after week 1, I think you're ecstatic if you roster Caleb Williams. There's going to be some ups and downs. He's a rookie quarterback, but he's mobile. He gets things done. And, Washington was middle of the pack in completions and yardage, but they are susceptible to touchdown plays. And Chicago has a wide receiver group that has the ability to make big plays in the receiving game with DJ Moore and Roma Dunze, and to some extent Keenan Allen, though he's probably not going to take it 80. He might take it 30, but so Chicago's got some weapons there with Swift and even Cole Kmet to go with those wide receivers. It's it's good to kind of it's nice watching them grow. The offensive line, which was horrible early in the season, has calmed down a little bit. They still got some work to do and could afford to add some talent there. But as the game has started to slow down a little bit for Caleb Williams, the team in general has picked up their play.
Meanwhile, for Washington, Jaden Daniels got banged up last week, is still not practicing. It's looking more like he may miss. If he is out, what do you make of this Commanders offense?
I was a lot more concerned until Marcus Mariota had a decent week last week. I'm still not going to bank on that this week if Mariota plays. I mean, we've seen that that prince turned into a pumpkin before. So, they've got Terry McLaurin. The mission is get the ball to McLaurin. Noah Brown's a pretty good second wide receiver, probably better as a third. They don't have a true number two. McCaffrey and De'Ami Brown provide some a little bit as a third wide receivers. Zach Ertz is consistent as ever. He's just not going to get you a ton of yards, but he'll get open and you need 5 yards. He'll get open and get you 6. It's just, will Brian Robinson stay healthy? Because he's been a solid running back so far this year. Eckler has made a couple splash plays. He had that one 50-yard run, a little pass in. But man, the dude looks slow. Like he don't have any legs left. He can. I think I could catch him.
Yeah, and a couple of linemen on the injury report too for the Commanders. That'll be worth following up on. Nick Allegretti, their guard, Tyler Badass, their center, and one of their tackles, Cornelius Lucas. Chicago is not Carolina. I am taking the Bears in this one.
They're at home, and so I am going to stick with my Commanders pick. But I'm gonna throw an asterisk on it that while I'm keeping it, if Jaden Daniels doesn't play, it's probably going to be the Bears.
Sunday Night Football, 3-3 Dallas Cowboys at the 3-4 San Francisco 49ers. Dennis, how are you feeling about Rico Dowdle?
I mean, he's RB33 on the year, and San Francisco is middle of the pack in fantasy points versus running backs. So they do give up some pass production. The issue is they just don't throw the ball to the running back that much in Dallas. They don't use the running backs that much in Dallas because, frankly, they're just not that good. Is this the week Dalvin Cook finally sees the field? Who knows? I know Zeke's frustrated. He's not getting the ball enough, but I love you, Zeke, but your tank's looking empty. And Dowdell is he's another. He's basically, I think he's about a tier up from. He's probably he may be in the bottom of the Alexander Madison tier. That might be where I put him.
Yeah, I mean, he's averaging 11 points per game. You could have worse flex options. Meanwhile, for the 49ers, Brandon Ayuk on IR, Juwan Jennings recovering from a hip injury. Deebo Samuel was in the hospital. Not sure if he's going to play. How are we feeling about the 49ers pass catchers?
I'd feel a lot better if Juwan Jennings was playing. Hopefully he is able to play through the hip injury.
He has not been practicing. Neither he nor Samuel are back at practice. I guess Samuel actually did get a limited practice today, so maybe that's looking up.
I mean, Jennings is still wide receiver 21 on the back of that one monster 150-point week. Yeah. I like Juwan Jennings, and honestly, I'd love for him to be healthy so we could see, because right now we feel like that big week was just such a fluke. I'd love to see him do it again. I kind of liked him when he came out of college. You know, he's my type of wide receiver. He's big. He's got good speed. You know, I think he's like 6'3", 210. He's one of these bigger wide receivers, and so I wanted him to be successful, and he just could never put it all together. He's probably best suited to be the wide receiver 3 on a team, but I'd like to see him pop off a little bit. You know, Pearsall's a great route runner. Coming off the gunshot injury, you know, he needs to kind of get some reps under his belt. He is a rookie. Jacob Cowing is a rookie, and I think Chris Conley's dinged up a little bit.
Yeah, Conley's not practicing. He's out.
They are not deep at the wide receiver position right now. So it's probably lining up to be a big week for Jordan Mason, Isaac Guerrero, and George Kittle.
Yeah, I like Kittle a lot. If Debo plays, I will put him in my lineup. Same with Jawan Jennings, but you need to watch those guys pretty closely. At least Debo's back at practice. That's got to make you feel better.
Have a plan if you're gonna play him. Make sure you've got a backup.
I am taking the 49ers at home.
I'm gonna take them as well.
Monday Night Football, the 2-5 New York Giants at the 5-2 Pittsburgh Steelers. Dennis, how are we feeling about Malik Neighbors? The Steelers defense was able to bottle up Devontae Adams and Garrett Wilson pretty effectively last week.
I think Neighbors is a guy that might make a play or two, but he's got Daniel Jones at quarterback who's going to be under a ton of pressure. It feels like this is going to be a game where the A-dot's about 1.5 yards. You know, they're going to have to get the ball out fast, and Jones is likely to he may get killed in this game.
Literal and figurative pressure, you know.
It's going to be rough. I think if you've got Neighbors, you're going to start him. You know, you're not going to sit him. But it's probably not going to be a fantastic week for anybody on the Giants side of the offense.
Meanwhile, for the Steelers, how are you feeling about George Pickens? He's wide receiver 22 on the season, but had a 22-point game last week with Russell Wilson. They talked leading into that game about the chemistry they've been building up.
You know, so George Pickens is widely regarded as kind of a head case. I don't know, a couple of weeks ago, he was on Adam Schefter's podcast. Did you hear it at all?
No.
Dude sounded, he was like super down to earth and reasonable. Sounded like a great guy. So I don't know how much of it's an act or he's just this kind of kooky dude. And, you know, we get to see all of his weirdest moments. He's a good wide receiver. And him and Russell Wilson do have some chemistry. You know, he loves, and whether it's conscious that he loves to make the big hard play or just that it happens and he makes it, you know, you throw it out there and let him go get it. You throw it near that sideline and let him snatch it, whatever. And Russell is a good passer, and he's got nice touch on the deep ball. And so I think Pickens, you know, he's going to be able to get deep on this Giants team. And I don't know how much pass rush. I think Thibodeau was out last week. I don't know.
He's on IR.
That's right. So, you know, their best pass rusher is out.
Well, they have Brian Burns. I think he's their best pass rusher.
Okay, fair enough. They have, you know, the Steelers have an opportunity to continue the momentum. And, you know, I feel for Justin Fields, but Russ looked good. He had a terrible start, put some balls in some bad places to start the game. Looked like it was going to be bad, but he turned it around, got settled down, made some really, really nice throws.
Yeah, I mean, he looks like a good fit there. I am going to take the Steelers in this one.
So am I.
We'll hope Daniel Jones survives. You know, he and Drake May probably the two guys. Prayers up. That'll do it for this week. I hope you guys have a wonderful week 8 coming up. I have a couple of days before our games kick into gear. Dennis, what can the people do?
Well, go to your favorite podcast platform, hit that search bar, type in the Fantasy Football Roundtable podcast, hit that subscribe button, give us a like, leave us a rating and a review. We'll always be there. Whenever you're down, we have over 700 episodes. You can go back and listen to how bad we were at the beginning, pick out the moments we were wrong, tweet them at us and tell us we're idiots. Whatever, that's fine.
Something to look forward to while I'm on my trip. You've convinced me maybe I should silence X notifications while I'm gone. Thursday Night Football just about to kick off. That'll get week 8 started. We hope you guys have a wonderful and a successful week 8. We'll see you on Tuesday to relive it all. Until then, have a wonderful weekend.
And happy trail.